All right, guys. So this is Travis, joined by Michael Todd, my special guest today for this next episode of the Renegade HPG podcast. And for those not familiar with Michael has produced an amazing cachet of fan-produced fiction and content for the BattleTech universe. He is kind of almost an expert historian in terms of the BattleTech from the corporate side and the development side, in his production of the document Unseen, which is an expansive kind of exploration of that history. You can find it on sarna.net. And that is just kind of the beginning. And so Michael has produced some amazing fan-made TROs, 28, 66, 30, 28, and 30, 49. I think if I can trust my memory to kind of pull those numbers together, which if you haven't seen any of these, I'm going to link everything in the description because anybody who's a BattleTech fan should definitely kind of check these out. It's really fun and amazing. And so I just want to kind of thank you, Michael, for joining me today. I'm really excited about this talk. And yeah, I can't wait to kind of, hear about how you came up with this and kind of your perspective kind of on that BattleTech history. And I didn't even mention that, you are the curator of the Charrette collection. And so Michael's had the privilege of kind of, developing that relationship with Robert and kind of helping him share with the community all the amazing kind of memorabilia that he's collected through the ages. But that's intro. I don't want to talk too much. I want you to be talking here, Michael. So thanks for joining us. And yeah, kind of start off with kind of what what kind of inspired this kind of dive into producing all this awesome content for BattleTech.
Well, thanks, Travis, and it's a great opportunity. I love talking BattleTech. I do live in a small town. There's not BattleTech fans everywhere in my little community. So any chance I get to talk to somebody who's as enthusiastic about the game and the franchise as you are is a very great opportunity. And I want to give a little shout out to your own deep dive into the TCG.
Yep.
I watched that because, of all the things I know about BattleTech, and there's a lot up here, the TCG is not an area of expertise of mine. It's an area that I played. So I have a big family.
Yeah.
And so I fell into playing card games with my family, and I liked BattleTech. So I just picked up the cards on eBay. Mm-hmm. That's how that whole thing started. But the people that you've spoken with about the TCG, I mean, I learned so much, some of their strategies, their combinations that they had come up with, like that Sentinel deck. I mean, that stuff really, it just blew my mind because I've only played within a very small group of people.
Of course, yeah.
So to see what other people were doing. But I did bring a couple of my favorite cards because I didn't want to show them. Like this little baby that I made.
Awesome. Yeah, and
right, the lamb, the Phoenix Hawk lamb card was very, very controversial.
No.
But yeah, so I had a lot of fun with that. So yeah, keep up the great work. It's an honor being here, and now I'll answer some of your questions rather than talk about the TCG, which you've done so much on.
No, I can't stop talking about it. It's a great game. So and I didn't even mention the expansive card set that you've produced, for the TCG. And so maybe we'll have some time to touch on that. But it's been fun diving into it. And like you, it's the card game is way easier to bring the family into it. And so I was like, with my girlfriend, the tabletop, I introduced her. And I was just a little too slow, a little bit too involved. And so I was like, well, maybe the card game, would you be interested in that? And she's like, yeah. I was like, all right, going on eBay and pick them up. And then kind of the idea to kind of do the podcast kind of came into play because I've been doing it for work. So, but yeah, it's been a blast. It's been fun. But yeah, let's, I was reading kind of on that article in Sarna, how you had kind of had a similar kind of, hiatus from BattleTech. It's kind of like I picked my stepbrothers taught me BattleTech when I was I think I was maybe like 11 or so, and then and they only visited in the summer, and so and nobody was around to play with, and so for me, my primary exposure to BattleTech is the novels, and playing the game whenever I could find somebody, but it's 90% the novels and the lore and the history. And you had a similar for me, and I kind of stepped away in college because there was definitely no opportunity to do it. And then the last year and a half, 2 years ago, I was like, I'm diving back in, and man, it's been a deep dive. But I think you had a similar kind of break and kind of reemergence and kind of rediscovering the awesome universe. But
Right. And so that really was what was behind a lot of the work that I created, was coming back to the franchise, after 15, 20 years. And I had discovered, because I had missed it, that all of this whole unseen thing had happened,
Mm,
and that all the mechs that I had sort of grown up with, had either disappeared or had changed into versions which didn't appeal to me and that I could barely recognize,
right.
to be frank about it. And so I was kind of like, well, I got to find out, what happened to my favorite franchise, because there's been this huge change. FASA was gone. I missed the whole fan pro thing. By the time I came back to it, CGL had gotten the franchise, and so I picked up some of their newer stuff at that time, which was all post jihad, post dark. I mean, we're dark age, and there's new TROs, and it just really made me want to see, how did we get here?
Yeah.
Because I was looking at these technologies, some of those new weapon systems like the T-Simp and other weapon systems I'd never even heard of. Heavy gauge rifles, heavy PPCs. I mean, the technology had just ballooned
Mm-hmm.
so much, because I had a copy of, I picked up Total Warfare, which was the current rule set when I came back. And then after that, I had to get in to look at the tech manual, which was hard to find back, and it was for ridiculous amounts of money. As you know, they were hard copies, were over $100. Had been out of print for a while, but I got a copy of. I started looking at just a list of tech that they had introduced into the game. And it didn't take me long, Travis, to realize I didn't know this game anymore. It had changed, it had evolved so far. So I got their latest TROs, like I said, and I saw all the new line art for the mechs. I gotta say, I was disappointed. I mean, in some ways, I was kind of brokenhearted. But then then I started seeing this MechWarrior Online art, and Russ Bullock and Piranha Games, and then they had envisioned the unseen mechs and a lot of the older mechs themselves, with a much more modern design aesthetic. I mean, it looked, and then people started doing fan art based on the MWO sculpt. So their forum over there on MechWarrior Online, had this great section that was just chock full of amazing MWO art that people had customized, often into the official schemes of different mercenary groups and house units and so on and so forth. And I looked at that art, and I was like, well, kind of, I kind of like that, like I could work with that. But it wasn't in the TROs, and I'm not a big gamer, so I tried MechWarrior Online maybe twice.
Okay.
I played all the first MechWarrior games, but I didn't get into MechWarrior Online. It was maybe I'm older, my reflexes are too slow, or maybe the controls, who knows what. But I love the art. So one of the first things that I thought was, I'm going to make an updated TRO, because I was looking at the time, it was TRO 3039, had all of the was the current TRO, didn't really have the unseen, didn't like the line art in it. And as a tangent, I'm bad about tangents. I was briefly excited when Catalyst announced their Secession Wars TRO.
Okay.
Because I was like, oh, they're gonna put all the unseen back in the TRO. It's gonna have new art, because at that point, CGL did have some new art for things like the Wasp and the even the Marauder, or the Wolverine, from the Kurita handbook. So I was really excited. I was like, oh, this is gonna be it. But then I got it.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I don't want to. I just, as a product, that's got to be one of the worst things I have ever seen them put out. CGL.
Yeah.
It was disappointment. Recycled line art. And I had contacted them about about TRO 3028. You know, I had
Yep.
offered him that. I had
Yeah.
said, hey, man, I got this thing that I'm doing here. You could use this for your new TRO. You can use my fluff, and you should use this MWO art. It's really sweet stuff. They weren't interested in it, so I just decided I was going to do it myself.
Yeah.
But I shouldn't really say myself, because
Yeah.
I didn't do the art. I did the writing, but I didn't do all the art. MechWare Online gets credit for the art, and a couple of the guys, I think of Fernando Pardo in particular, who made a lot of the templates and did a lot of the sort of the customizing of the art to match different mercenary groups. Because if you look at TRO 3028, they're all Canon paint jobs. It says right next to the mech, like which unit, and where they were in 3028 and what that paint job is. I didn't do the paint jobs. I just did the writing.
Well, it's beautiful to look at, and you actually you're gonna pull a question I was gonna have is you have a hard copy, all right? What's the best way for us to get a hard copy? Tell us, you know, is there a print on demand? Is that something you had to kind of, you know, finagle yourself, or is that I know that there's ways that people can do print on demand stuff, but I am not in that know. So, you know, how can people get hard copies of these TROs, you know, like what you just pulled up?
Well, you know, I mean, if I had my way, I would have shown up at Gen Con with like a few cases of these things. I'm sure I could have sold them like hotcakes out of there. The short answer is lulu.com is a printing service.
All right.
And so I printed out all my work using lulu.com, but for obvious reasons, I didn't make that publicly accessible.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, and for our copyrights, we're not selling these things. You know, you can always print things on your own and use it. There's no copyright infringement there. But yeah, so that's awesome, because I am you know, all these digital books these days, I can't do it. I stare enough at a screen, especially now that I'm editing all these videos. My goodness, yeah, you gotta have the hard copy.
Gotta have the hard copy.
Yeah, and I don't want to put my my USB drive on my bookshelf. You know, I have to have something beautiful put on my bookshelf, and I'm not going to get Robert Charrette to sign my USB drive either. I'm going to have him sign my Wolves on the Border copy. So yeah, that was the first. And you know, for that, and the art in there, you know, and it's you know, I'm a big fan. I just started figuring out painting for the first time, which was a 25 year in the making ordeal, because I remember buying my first kind of paint thing in like 97 or something, and I painted my first miniature in March of this year. But the Unicolor Compendium online and all those, I mean, I'm not an original thinker, but I'm very good at kind of derivative work and kind of taking and looking at it. So I kind of look at those to get inspiration for my schemes, and there's definitely some beautiful ones in there. That I've seen. I'm like, I'm got to paint that. I got to paint that. I might have to wait a year for my skill to develop to that point, but it's super fun. Are those designs exclusive to the TRO, or were those pulled from like the Unicolor Compendium website or similar places?
Right. So I mean, as the project evolved, so at first the project started in secret. It was just me essentially ripping off MWO art from their forum, directly from their forum, and then writing my own fluff based on the canon, because I just love stupid details, and this TRO is full of some obscure stupid details that I pulled from, you know, the original BattleTech lore, which is what I'm most familiar with.
Yeah.
And then I met Justin Kase, and he started doing some of the art, where he was giving me some sort of custom paint jobs for different units. And then he contacted Fernando Pardo, who had on his DeviantArt page essentially created templates of all the MWO mechs that were essentially like Photoshop templates that other people could use to then customize that mech's color scheme to whatever they wanted. So then it spidered out to Fernando. And so between largely the three of us, I handled the writing, Justin Kase handled the art, and Pardo was always, I mean, as soon as MWO was releasing a new mech, he was getting the templates out. That Justin was then working with to customize. So Justin has got great attention to detail. He had a spreadsheet with all the mechs because he didn't want to do 2 units. He didn't want any 2 mechs to be from the same unit. And then he wanted to, you know, have good distribution of all of the major factions, Intersphere, Periphery, Mercenary. I mean, and that was his kind of thing. And I was fine with that because I was just wanting to write. So I was busy writing the TRO entries, but there's a couple holes. Like, for example, you know, the Wasp, right? I mean, I love TRO 3025. And it opens with, you know, the great triumvirate, Locust, Stinger, Wasp, boom, boom, boom. And that's what got me most, I think, about the 3039 TRO and the Secession Wars TRO. I'm like, it has to have the Locust, Wasp, and Stinger must be the first 3 pages of the TRO. It has to be. There's no other option. But of course, there was no Wasp, really, and there was no Stinger in MWO. So, so Justin, and I think he worked with a couple other people. He basically composited a number of existing MechWarrior Online mechs into what was a Wasp and a Stinger. So like the Wasp has a modified Shadowhawk head.
Okay.
Or sorry, the Stinger has the modified Shadowhawk head, and the Wasp has like a modified Griffin head. And then he tweaked the arms and the body to match.
Right.
So there are a few pieces of artwork in here that are not MWO originals. They're derivatives.
Yeah.
Their designs.
Yeah. And what's, you know, and kind of bringing your research into the history as well, what is it that allowed MechWarrior Online to use so many of those unseen models where it wasn't being used kind of in the main, you know, the tabletop or through CGL and production? Do you know, what kind of the breakdown is? You know, why is Piranha Games or Harebrained different than Catalyst Games in that respect?
Oh man, well, that's a meaty question.
Oh boy.
And I'll say up front that, you know, I mean, Russ Bullock got a lot of crap from the community for a long time about PGI and his business model and what he was doing. And I won't speak to any of that, but I will say that, you know, it's my belief that it's Russ Bullock is who we have to thank for the unseen coming back.
Yeah.
And it's because, and he's also, I know, in Canada, which I thought was an interesting. He's not in the U.S. He's in Canada. Probably doesn't make a big difference, but maybe psychologically it does.
Okay.
Because he was essentially the guy who was like, "Screw it, man. You know, I'm making the unseen, and if they want to come after me, they can come after me."
Okay.
And when I say they, you know, Harmony Gold.
We know who
really who we're talking about. So I mean, I think to a large degree, frankly, Russ just had the balls to do it, and put it out there.
Yeah.
And Catalyst didn't.
Okay. And for the community, tell us who is Russ is.
So he's a founder of Piranha Games. And the driving force behind MechWarrior Online, which of course now is MechWarrior Mercenaries 5, I believe is what is their latest release.
Right.
Which uses the same models and the arts that were developed in MWO. And so he's the one who brought him back, and his art is what's in TRO 3028, or his artist's work.
Well, it sounds like maybe you can tell me if I'm interpreting this right. All right. And so, you know, Harmony Gold is the bully, right, on the block, you know, and FOSSA is a small company, you know, and they've been bullying FOSSA for a long time. And you're saying Russ with Piranha Games because, you know, it's no surprise to anyone. Guess what? Computer games have a way bigger budget than little tabletop games, you know. And so it sounded like Russ was like, just, I'll be the bigger bully, you know. It's like if they want to bring this to court, then I'm gonna do it. You know, is that kind of an accurate assessment of that situation, or it's just, you know, I guess it's like, I played plenty of poker in my days. You know, at some point you just gotta, bet bet the pot and see if they're going to call you. It sounded like he just was like, this, I'm going all in, you know, you're going to call me or not. Which is awesome.
That's what it looks like to me. And Harmony Gold did go after him. It's not like they didn't go after him. I mean, there was a legal case, and Piranha Games was front and center in that legal case. And then Harmony Gold also dragged in Catalyst and HBS into the lawsuit as well, once they discovered that Catalyst had snuck out some unseen artwork on the cover of some of its source books. And of course, HBS and Mitch Gettleman, you know, had originally planned to put both the Warhammer and Marauder in the HBS BattleTech game. So that everybody got drug into it.
Yeah.
But Piranha Games was the lead on that. And as a really interesting note on that case, because I had written Unseen, you know, all around that time. I actually got to speak with part of the legal team, consulted on the side on the legal team, on whether or not these designs, how similar or dissimilar were these designs from the copyrighted Macross Robotech original designs.
That's interesting. Yeah, and you know, diving into a little bit of Unseen too, and for people that are interested, you know, and I'm on all the Facebook groups, and people are always kind of asking, you know, about the Unseen, because they're like us, you know, they're just getting back into it and like what's going on. And so if people have questions about that legal history, I mean, your document is, you know, incredibly expansive. Kind of dive into that. You know, it's pretty interesting, you know, to kind of, you know, look at that and look, especially around the kind of battle droids, you know, era, and kind of bringing in the little plastic models and how kind of that was set up, and where the legal, I mean, from my eye, they're clearly all derivative of the kind of those original designs. I don't even know how they kind of argue that it's not, or how, I mean, obviously I don't know copyright law. I don't know how far away from the original you have to deviate before it's something different. So I don't know how that works, but I think, you know, everybody, you know, with a cursory understanding understands that the point is that Harmony Gold didn't come up with those designs, right? You know, it's just, you know, it was an artist in Japan that came up with those designs. And so the fact that, and I think I also read, and maybe you can confirm this, that that there was a legal stipulation in Harmony Gold's agreement where they didn't have to pay the legal fees to enforce the copyright. Is that, am I remembering something that I read right? That it was actually the people in Japan that had to carry the legal fees for all these lawsuits? Am I pulling that out of my butt? Have you heard that? I remember reading that.
I would want to go double
Okay.
check. The problem is that, you know, all of the settlements were undisclosed. I mean, the filings were open, and I read all the filings, but the ultimate resolution to all of these cases were undisclosed settlements.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of there are a lot of answers that I will never know.
Yeah.
And even when I ask the people that do know, they are still unwilling to tell me. Probably because they know I've got a big mouth and I probably say something.
Yeah, well, that's there's no reason to lose a couple $1 million by sharing that information, which is clearly part of the NDAs. But yeah, so, you know, getting back into the TROs, you know, so, you know, 3028, that was the first one that you did.
Actually, that's the second.
Okay, that's the second. All right, which one was the first?
Well, the first one is every BattleTech fanboy everywhere has their own 2866 TRO. Because
Okay.
all it is it's your own optimized designs of all of the existing mechs.
Okay.
Because who didn't spend endless hours being like, oh, this mech sucks.
Yeah.
If I just, you know, like, first thing to do, oh, if I took off the AC5 and I put on a medium laser and dumped the ammo's not going to explode, and I've got 4 extra tons, and then you can, and the armor's shot, and so, I mean, everybody does this.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
So that's all 2866 to me. It's my personal house rules, and all my fanboy designs for how I would have made all of the mechs if, you know, I had been the lead designer.
Right. And that's is a harder one to find. And so we were geared up, ready to go into this podcast. And I was just kind of re-reviewing kind of, the background for you to make sure, I was clear and ready to go before I even found that. And I didn't find it through any of the official links. I found it just because I happened to be searching images, and then I saw that one and I was like, there. So I will definitely link that in the description, because it's not on Sarna with the other two. But just reading through it, I mean, I think, when people look back to the original TROs, obviously, it was this perfect storm, right? Because it's these captivating designs and the art, but it's also the fluff and the text and the kind of the history, and then the notable mech warriors, and all this stuff. And for your TROs, we're talking about kind of the designs and stuff, but until people kind of pick this up and realize, I mean, you did a is beautiful fluff text in there. And so, I commend you for that. It's fun to read. It's as natural to read as any of the officially produced stuff. I love it. I have just as much fun reading it as the other. I'm nowhere close to being done reading it, so I've got lots more hours worth of enjoyment to kind of get out of it. But yeah, it's and so, I love kind of the intros, kind of the Comstar acolytes, doing the reviews and kind of, where the TRs are from. So that had to be fun. And even kind of reading through it, they may be your custom designs, but the fluff justifies it, man. You did a good job. So it's not just someone throwing out this specced out mech sheet. But
Right,
yeah, it's
right.
like that must have taken forever for you to do. Is that or are you kind of a quick writer? Is that something that kind of, or how long did it take to kind of produce each
Well,
of
the great joy of the TRO is that, each element is so self-contained. It's like, oh, I'm gonna write the Wolverine today, or I'll write, whatever. So it's just one. So you don't have to. It's not as intimidating to approach it. And I was led by the art of MWO trickling out. Like, I didn't write fluff for which there was no art.
Yeah.
So for example, the last one that I think I did was the Hatchet, and that was a special because HBS released the Hatchet art. That was never in. That's another weird one in there because it's not an MWO. It's not in MechWarrior 5. That was HBS who brought. And I didn't put the Bull Shark. I thought about the Bull Shark. I didn't put the Bull Shark in, but I did put the Hatchet in it. But it becomes an easy flow because you're just like, oh, I'm just gonna write about this one mech. I don't need to write that much about it. And so it probably 3 days for one mech.
Okay.
I'd say about 3 days for one mech, and that's not full time. That's just in my spare
of course.
time.
Yeah. Well, it's enjoyable. It shows, and for the artwork, long before kind of connecting you to these, or even figuring out that it was a TRO and its own, I had definitely come across the image that is the cover image for 3028, which is a beautiful piece of BattleTech art. Is that original for the TRO, or was that kind of pulled from MechWarrior? Okay.
Harebrained schemes.
Okay. Yeah, they did good.
From Harebrained schemes. But I'm really excited to see, for example, Catalyst, the Kickstarter, just released their King Crab art.
Yeah.
For the miniature. And we all know where that came from. I mean, it looks very similar to the HBS King Crab, which goes back to the MWO King Crab. So there's some consistency now across these designs, which I'm really starting to enjoy and appreciate. I mean, it's the true reboot. Between all of the new miniatures, the new art, the coming Ilcon. I mean, this is it, man. I mean, this is if there's ever such a thing as the reboot, this is probably Definitely. It.
Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, I was lucky to come in right. I came back in. It was maybe 6 months or so before the Kickstarter, booted, and not too long before the Kickstarter was announced. So I was lucky. I didn't have to kind of sit through this period where all I had was, TRO, 3085 or 3140 and stuff like that. Because like you, is like for me, I guess I'm kind of the old fanboy, where the original art kind of sang to me, and for that, I wasn't picking up miniatures kind of in kind of the Dark Ages, not only because I'm just not familiar with the Geode and Dark Ages, not because I refuse to kind of acknowledge it, just because I haven't caught back up to that point in the lore. For me, BattleTech, the universe ends wherever I've reached in the novels. And right now only up to a little bit past Clan Invasion, but certainly the art didn't really kind of ring to me, in that. But you also, let's talk about the 3049 as well, because there's some really cool stuff in there, especially at the end where you're deviating into some of those other designs. So that's now your most recent. All right, so we got the 3049 kind of, let's talk about that process.
Oh man. Well, I mean, and I have to give I'll give a little shout out to Blaine Lee Pardoe here and his Forever Faithful novel, which was fabulous. I mean, while I'm on the whole tangent in general, there is a renaissance in BattleTech fiction going on right now.
Yes.
That I dearly love, and Blaine Lee was a big part of that. Of course, he's also one of the original writers too. So he's got a great history with the franchise. Very excited to see a lot of his newer stuff come out. I tell you though, and I have this I brought this Greywash Protocol book here, and I'll tell you why I'm excited about that book in particular. It's because for me it's a new voice. It's Michael, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I wish I did. I'd say Ciravea probably. But a new author to me. I think he did some Battlecore stuff, but a new author. Love new voices, and I like Shrapnel for that reason. When they put out the big Shrapnel magazine with a lot of authors in it. So there's been a great renaissance in the fiction. But in terms of 3049, so what really happened was there was all of this Clan OmniMech art that was MWO art, beautiful. They had started making the 2C lines, and so I've been keeping an eye on it. And it finally just reached a critical mass where there was now enough Clan OmniMech art and 2C art that I thought I could probably compile it. I mean, a big part of what I do too, Travis, is really sort of what I think of as the documenting of history.
Right.
So, I mean, in the way that TRO 3028 to me is a documentation of all of the wonderful MWO art. 3049 is that same documentation, but for the Clan art.
Yeah.
And I'm not a Clan fan. See, that's the other thing. I'm not really a Clan fan, which is why it sat around for so long. But then when I started reading, the Forever Faithful and the whole Clan and some of his the Clan Wolverine, the Clan that can't be named, and then there's all these rumors now about the Smoke Jaguars and the Fidelis and all this, and so I became interested in sort of an alternate history of the Clan origin, because everybody wants to talk about, Nicholas Kerensky, the great founder, and except he had a brother, Audrey Kerensky, and I started reading these things, and some of it was that there's that weird source book. I think it's the Jihad Secret Conspiracies or Jihad Secret Documents. I don't know. It's a fabulously interesting source book. It just has all these little weird nuggets in it, of unsubstantiated BattleTech rumor.
Okay.
And it touches on, this on Nicholas Kerensky's brother, Audrey. So as I started writing, the fluff around 3049, first of all, I became interested in the documenting of when each Clan weapon system was developed and when each Clan mech was developed. So there's a nice timeline. And I mean, that took some serious digging to find that out. And then I saw in terms of the weapons development, they're all weirdly clumped up in a pretty short time span, which overlaps essentially with the trial of annihilation of Clan Wolverine. So there's an interesting sort of telling of the Clan history in the beginning of that book, which is my telling of it based on some rumors and some little innuendos that come from a number of different source books. I can't call that canon. I wouldn't call that canon, a canon telling, but it's an interesting telling, and
Yeah.
that's the only thing that I think that makes it an interesting piece.
Definitely. And yeah, it's as well researched and as close as you can be without getting that kind of stamp of approval from Catalyst, from what it seems. And so yeah, that's I can't imagine the amount of just the research kind of going into that and kind of pulling out those details, but it's fun. And I had the chance to talk to Blaine kind of on an earlier podcast, and he was very generous, to kind of share that time, and it was fun. And so, but yeah, just that resurgence of kind of fiction coming out has been awesome. I'm kind of stuck in my kind of timeline reading order, so I'm like, I can't keep kind of looking for what new books are coming out that are out of the timeline that I can read without kind of messing up where I am. But it's fun, and the betrayal of ideals, and certainly the shrapnel were kind of a fun way to kind of get out of my timeline restrictions there.
Well, the one question I got for you, Travis, is are you going to read the Dark Age novels?
I will when I get there. It is an intimidating stack, and so the collector in me has acquired, and I got this amazing eBay listing of this guy that was selling his collection of novels that were almost all Unbroken Spines Mint novels. He had it listed for like $1,100, and I was like, there's no way I can do that, but it was listed for a couple months, and so I sent him, I was like, there's no way I can pay that, but I can give you $450. And so I got almost every BattleTech book in pristine condition, including tons of, and this wasn't just novels, it was tons of other stuff as well, which I ended up selling the other stuff to pay for the novels, which was great. So I have almost all the novels. They're stacked on my shelf, and it's an intimidating amount, especially those Dark Ages. But I will get there. I might be 50 by the time I get there. I'm turning 40 next month. So, but I will do it. And I'm having a blast because I was 15 when 15, 16 when I read most of it. So, I mean, there's little like key things that I have like a deja vu type sense when I'm reading it. But for the most part, it's all, the novels are new. It's like, and so I'm enjoying them like I am for the first time. It's been fun, but I'll get there. But yeah, I've skipped a couple in my second read through along the way. I skipped things like Star-Lord, which I might come back to at some point. But I wanted to go from stackpole to stackpole and kind of skip to natural selection pretty quick. So
I think Star-Lord's one of the few that they did not reissue as part of the Legends series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we talked about that with Blaine a little bit, about the little background for that book. So definitely people check out that podcast if you want a little bit of the dirty history of Star-Lord. But yeah, so I'm reading through. I'll get through there. It's a ton of stuff. I got a little 4-year-old. You have many more than just the single 4-year-old, as I recall. So you know what it's like, kind of chasing them around. So I find the time when I can. But recording these podcasts has been my sink. I've been recording all these about the TCG, and I was telling Gustav, one of the guests that I've been talking to a lot lately. I was like, I've been recording all this stuff about TCG, but I haven't played it in a month because I've been recording and editing all the time. But it's been fun getting along and getting on there. So is there any project in the works? Anything that's kind of is happening that we can kind of look forward to?
Yeah, that's always a tricky thing. The last idea that I have kicking around now relates to my work, both of the Unseen that needs updating now, because the case hadn't been settled by the time I finished writing that.
Mm-hmm.
That case is now settled, so that needs an update. But the other thing is, through my work with the Charrette collection, I've unearthed so many fascinating stories and photographed so many unique artifacts, that I was considering the idea of a richer historical telling of the BattleTech franchise that would incorporate some of the research from Unseen, but then also really blend in the evolution of the miniatures, because I've got so many good stories and pictures of that. So, for example, I tore my hair out at first trying to figure out, how many different sculpts of the Battlemaster or how many different sculpts of the Archer, or how many different sculpts, and when did they come out, and how do you tell them apart? And so for a lot of those early miniatures, you know, I was thinking maybe I might try to document those out. I mean, if you've ever read any of the Charrette collection posts, I mean, there are some great anecdotal stories in there, some wonderful information that I'd like to preserve in a written form, you know, a compiled form, whether it's a PDF or printed book.
Right. Yeah, and I'm on that Charrette collection Facebook group. I definitely recommend it for anybody that's interested in kind of the history. And yeah, so what have been kind of some of the kind of favorite or standout artifacts that you've had the opportunity to kind of, you know, see and kind of, you know, I guess pass through in the collections of the community, you know, why we're doing it? Or maybe, you know, before we even answer that, I'll come back to that question. Talk to us a little bit about how you got connected with Robert and how you got tied into doing the Charrette collection.
Right. So all that comes through my research into the unseen. You know, there were so many gray nebulous areas that I was like, I got to talk to the people who were directly involved at the time where this stuff was going down. And it was hard, and I only met with limited success. I mean, my two most notable successes where I got to speak multiple times with Sam Lewis, you know, who was the lead BattleTech developer there in the later 80s. And certainly was the lead developer when the clans came out. And then I also got to meet Robert Charrette. I had email correspondences with a number of other people who were on the business end of FASA. But ultimately, it turned out Robert Charrette did not live far from where I live. And so when I discovered, and I live in nowhere. I mean, I live in the middle of nowhere. And frankly, you know, Robert lives in the middle of nowhere too.
Yeah.
So when I discovered where he lived, I was like, I got to come down. You know, I want to come down and interview you for this work this unseen research work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I don't live far from you. And he agreed. He agreed to do that. So that was when I met him for the first time. I was just interviewing him, you know, on background for, you know, I had a lot of questions about early BattleTech, and it just so happened, you know, that he was right there at the beginning, both on the FASA side as an author, but also on the Raul Partha side as the sculptor. So he just had this unique, you know, this unique perspective on both sort of halves of that whole business and what was going on then. And so I interviewed him a couple times, came back to him with a lot of questions. And then I got and I got to tell you, I got the impression, you know, Charrette's such an interesting fellow. Ultimately, in Charrette's life, BattleTech is a very short span of his life.
Yeah.
It's maybe 6-8 years. You know, he went on to work on many other things. And in fact, he even found his own miniature company with his own, you know, Paul Room Enterprises and his own lines. I mean, BattleTech was not a big part of his life. Which was really hard for me to accept.
Yeah.
And he thought I was a kook. I think at first he definitely thought I was kooky because, you know, and he was very nervous about meeting me the first time. He was like, oh, so some crazy BattleTech fanboy's gonna come to my house and drool all over me, which I might have done a little bit. But it was a small part of his life, huge part of my life, very small part of his life. So realizing that, and having seen the extent of his collection, of which, you know, BattleTech paraphernalia, miniatures, memorabilia is a small part of Charrette's collection. He has a great love of dinosaurs. You wouldn't. It's probably the best dinosaur, you know, sculpture museum outside of the Smithsonian he's got. But I suggested to him. I came to him with a formal proposal. I said, you know, Robert, I think I could sell a lot of your BattleTech memorabilia. This is a good time to do it. The franchise is just now being re-energized. I think there's a lot of interest in this early stuff you've got right now, and it doesn't seem to me like you're that attached to it. And ultimately, that proved to be the case. Of course, there's a set of things he's going to keep.
Right.
You know? But much of it we have collaborated on, and the Charrette collection idea was born. And it was pretty successful right from the start. It was successful enough, that Robert let me come back multiple times, and now we're at the end of it.
Yeah.
And this is the final wave of his BattleTech, of the Charrette collection BattleTech.
Yeah.
So that's it's bittersweet in some ways, but then also he mentioned Shadowrun, which I don't know if you're familiar with Shadowrun.
I'm not. I'm just. I know what it is, but I haven't played it. But,
Right. So Shadowrun was Fast's other major franchise at the same time, and of course, amazingly enough, Charrette wrote the original rule set for that. So if you have a first edition Shadowrun rulebook, Charrette's front and center on that, and he wrote the first trilogy of Shadowrun novels. But that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. Well, that may, from knowing his work in the BattleTech novel universe, that they may be worth picking up, even not being familiar with the Shadowrun universe. But yeah, what's and the kind of those conversations, and I think to preface, a lot of people that are familiar with Robert, familiar with him through the novels, because his name is prominent there. But when most people pick up their minis, they're not looking at kind of who the sculptor is in the minis, and I think people just don't realize. Just dozens and dozens of the original sculpts were sculpted by Robert, and it's set. And I mean, the sculpts look awesome. I'm a huge fan of most of the original sculpts, and I mean, it's amazing when you see people that can be at the top of the game in multiple completely disparate disciplines, and for him to be producing the miniatures, and I'm also producing these amazing novels, of BattleTech is awesome. But yeah, and kind of going, we had talked about the trading card game, and you have your own kind of set of that trading card game as well, which has been fun for me to go through, and I've told the guys that we need to do an episode kind of going through that card set, because like the other stuff, it's beautiful art. They look like the normal arts, but essentially you were just like kind of screw this, I'm putting all the unseens in there, which I love, because I'm building my decks. I was actually, the most recent decks I built for the TCG were like a 30-40s thematic Davian versus Kurita deck, and it's like there's none of the unseens. It's very hard to do that when you don't have the unseens. Right. And I'm like, I can't build. I'm strict timeline. I can't use any of the mechs that weren't produced at that time. And but looking at yours, kind of, I've got questions in terms of, and I'll pop up cards as we're talking about them here. But did you have like a formal process in terms of costing those, or were you just kind of like, I'm gonna put it where I want to?
There's I have to give credit to somebody else there. But first of all, I love that you said that, Travis. Me and you, we've got to find some opportunity to play that game against each other. My mindset was the exact same way. It drove my family to absolute insanity because I would develop these variations where, it was very time frame based. Oh, you can't send illegal cards. You can't have that version, of that mech because we're playing Succession Wars, right? So I had my Succession War rule set, and then I had my clan rule set, and then anyway. I don't think I ever wrote down any of all that. But if you look closely on the set, you will see how I had the idea of houses and factions. There's a single card that represents each house and some of the major factions. Yeah. All right. So I think we would have a lot of fun in decks together, because it did become, the building of the deck became almost as fun as the playing of it. Definitely. But I felt those holes just like you did. Yeah. I'm like, oh my God, I can't, there's no Wolverines, there's no Shadowhawks, there's no Phoenix Hawks, there's no Thunderbolts. Like, how can I play without a Thunderbolt?
There's no Phoenix Hawk LAM in there, right?
Well, that was just because people have such strong feelings about it. That's just me poking my eye at people, poking my finger in people's eyes. Because you want to talk lambs, everybody goes crazy.
Yeah, that's too funny. Yeah,
so the answer is Justin King, right? Because the reality is, I had no earthly idea how they came up with the costs, the armor, the points, or anything. Like from the mechanics, clueless. But I was putting them out there on social groups that I was a member of, and this guy Justin King, it was driving him crazy, and he was like, He's like, look, dude, you're just making this up. And overlaid on top of that is the idea of rarity, which even throws another wrench into the whole mess because some are rare and some aren't rare. And so he's like, look, I'll go through all the cards and I'll adjust them,
Okay.
so that they're not so off, off base. Because
Right.
I didn't really know.
Yeah.
I was literally just making up numbers and putting them on there just through like gut instinct. So in the final version, Justin King went through all of those. And he had his own weird calculation spreadsheet that he had that spat out the numbers. And I would fight some cards I fought with him over and was like, I'm just doing it this way because like cards with both overheat and alpha strike.
Okay.
He hated that. He hated that. And I was like, no, it's gonna have both. It's gonna have both overheat and alpha strike.
And that's in the rule sets. I mean, the rule sets specifically say what you're supposed to do if they have both overheat and alpha strike. You have to overheat before you alpha strike. So obviously, it was meant to be in there. But yeah, but that's interesting. And one of the amazing things, kind of talking to the guys about the CCG is how some of them have reverse engineered the cost, and so they very accurately understand kind of what that cost is. And certainly, if anyone joins the Facebook group for the BattleTech CCG, then you can kind of take a deep dive into what those guys have done in terms of advancing the game and developing their own card sets. And for anybody is interested, you can do that. And there's a lot to have, but yours, as we talked about before, looking pretty is just as important as reading pretty, and BattleTech sometimes, and they look good, so was that, I'm gonna have to, if you have a template or something that you use to make that, I'm gonna have you send it over to me.
Well, that was the other, yeah, I do have a template. I didn't make the template. There's a core of people I work with, and they're all seem to be named Justin for whatever reason.
Okay.
But Justin Kase, who I worked with on TRO, he also developed the template for the CCG cards. And Justin King did the statting for it. See, I'm just interested. At the time, I was just having this complete unseen obsession, and whatever I was working on, was essentially trying to bring the unseen back into modern times. Like
right,
whatever I was doing, it was like, and of course, and I say modern times, the TCG game came out in late 90s, I think, right?
Yep.
Late 90s it came out.
96, 97.
But late enough to not get any of the unseen, though. So, I decided to start playing the card game, and I'm like, well, if half the cards are missing, to my mindset. I'm like, half the cards are missing.
Definitely. Oh, I feel you. When I'm sitting there and playing, I was like, I want to play a Warhammer in here. Let's do it. So I'm gonna I'll get your cards. And the guys in the Facebook CCG group, they have some the printers, set up where people can kind of print their own custom card sets. So I'm definitely gonna try to put those up. Do you have a printed out version of all your cards? Or are they
digital?
Awesome.
I have two full sets. I had them professionally printed using makeplayingcards.com with the right stock and the right color core, and Justin Kase's attention to detail on the template really shows up. You mix them in there, and they're pretty indistinguishable. A lot of people were like, why didn't you use the Commander's Edition template?
Ew, it's so ugly. It's horrible. That's why. That's why you didn't use it. For me, I'm trying to find some artists now to do my own custom cards, and I'm gonna have them completely redesign the card itself. It's going to look like a different card game, because I think that the art and the game itself is amazing, but man, that base template is not aesthetically appealing. So, and the Commander's Edition just doubled down on that. Just so much black space. It was like, you don't want black space, when you're creating art. But so we've talked about kind of those love for those unseen designs. What are some of the not unseen designs? What are some of the new stuff that you do like? What are some favorites out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I have to say, I just finished reading Divided We Fall, which actually features the Wolf's Dragoons in it. And it was actually, the cover of that introduces a new mech.
Yep.
And And if I had my brain on fully, I could tell you what the name of that, of what that design is. But I can't recall what it is right now. It's hard to say. I've spent too much time looking at old designs. And the thing about it is, oh, I got a story for you. You probably haven't seen this one. You haven't. So when I come back to the franchise, I was trying to catch up on the timeline, and I missed out on this whole clicks thing, the whole MechWarrior clicks thing, which Jordan Weissman was behind. And I was getting back into the game, and the miniatures, and this would have been 2014. All the miniatures were outlandishly expensive.
Yeah, and as I recall, they were random too, wasn't it? Kind of like you bought the packs and you didn't even know what you were gonna get. Oh.
Yes, right. So I couldn't afford any of the box sets because they were like $300 out of print, $300 on eBay. Buying them individually through Metal was going to be, that would have. So I was buying like 20, 30 pounds of Clicks Mechs at a time, and they were all of these new designs. The Raptors and the new looking Battle Masters, and they had all the industrial mechs, right? They had the forestry mechs, the agro mechs, the mangonels they had. I mean, all of the stuff in the 3150 TRO stuff or 3145 TRO stuff. So I bought a mess of these clicks, and then I just started ripping off the bases and gluing them onto hex bases.
Okay.
So now I have all these new mechs. Right, and I don't know what any of them are, and this was another terrible moment, because I'm like, okay, well, so what TRO are these mechs in from this Clicks game? And the answer was, they're spread across like 5, 6 TROs. There's tons of them. So that's another weird little side project that I made that's probably not linked anywhere, but I made what I called my war book, and it has little pictures of the different new Clicks miniatures, well, actually the old Clicks miniatures, next to the tabletop stats.
Okay. Oh, that would be incredibly helpful. Yeah.
Because I couldn't identify them. I had no idea what I was looking at. I've never seen a mangonel before. I'd never seen this, this penetrator before. Or these other ones. So I made my own identification guide, and then I went and mined up all of the stats from the 10,000 different TROs that they were spread across. And I will say they had an Atlas II sculpt in Clicks that, I think I finally caved in and paid like $20 for it, because it looked that good.
Awesome.
And so, and it was a Click. So, but put it on a hex base, the scale was a little bit different. But, I played a bunch of games using, in fact, the last true campaign I played, I made all the players start with industrial mechs.
Interesting. Okay.
They all started with these little Clicks industrial, which was great, because then, when they got like a Mjolnir, a little light Steiner battle mech, they were like, oh my God, it's an actual battle mech. And if that doesn't say Dark Age, nothing will ever say Dark Age. then that moment, oh my God, it's actually a battle mech.
Funny. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and going through, going back to kind of the art for the things, one that I feel like this is a love it or hate it, but I love it, is the Piranha. I think that is just one. The name for that mech is about as perfect as you can get for what it does, and the art really stands out, because I was flipping through the TRO, last week before we were going to connect, and I was like, I like that. Do you have, for those paint schemes in those in the TROs, are there kind of favorite paint schemes that you have, or have you tried to kind of paint them yourself, or anything?
I tried maybe twice to paint them myself, and then it became really clear to me pretty quickly that my skill is going to be with words. It's not going to be on the graphic design front as much as I really, really wish it would have been. It wasn't, but So there in the TRO, it's another oddball mech. It's called the Jayhawker, right? Because I was also looking for it's really a bushwhacker, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
it's a bushwhack, but the bushwhacker didn't exist in 3028. So, but yet, if you do a really strict read of the lore of the bushwhacker, you could see how it might, and this, because I did some stretching on that. I stretched this one so far that some of the other people I was working out were like, Michael, this is too far.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, I could stretch it far enough that I think you could have had this design in 3028. So I made the Jayhawker. But there's a lot of nice actual, if you zoom into the Jayhawker art, you'll see there's a lot of little sort of decal work on there. And in fact, one of my favorite things about all of that art, and that goes to Justin, Justin Kase's work on that, manufacturer names. Like if you look at the linesman, which is what the Daboku came, it's presented in a special section of the TRO. It's called experimentals or prototypes, something like that.
Yeah.
But it's covered with manufacturer logos for the various pieces of equipment that are on it.
That's
and
awesome.
So if there's an art element that I really started geeking out on, it was that, putting on sort of manufacturer logos on the relevant pieces of equipment on these mechs.
That's awesome detail.
And in a lot of ways, I mean, I like race cars for that sense. It's like, I mean, that was sort of the analogy. When you see the race cars, they've got stickers all over that thing. The people who made the suspension have sticker on the side of it. So we did get into a little bit of that. I did convince Justin to make a couple that are pretty richly detailed the deeper you get in, but it's the decals. I'm a huge fan of the little names. Sometimes you put little names on them, pilot names or kill markers.
Awesome. Now, one thing that's not in there is that notable mech warrior section. And now my assumption is that that's not a desire, that's a space, of just not necessarily having enough space. But is there somewhere compiled a list of notable mech warriors that just didn't make it to that kind of final copy?
No. The short answer is no. The design came in early. The reason that I cut that section was because I really wanted the manufacturers and the costs.
Mm-hmm.
I was obsessing about the costs of everything, whether in C-bills or in BV points, or and the full listing of variants. So that replaces that section, and I couldn't do it for just some and not all, because I'm obsessive that way. They either everybody has it or nobody has it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think people have to appreciate having all that stuff in one place, because flipping through 3 different books to get your cost and your battle value, and then your different variants, or if you're doing the role planning of kind of figuring out what the manufacturers are, so having all that in one place is awesome. So there's the good editing choice there. To kind of use that space the way it got used there.
One of the things that I have. I don't think it made it anywhere. Maybe in 2866 was as part of this, because I guess I might have a little OCD in me. I must have a little OCD in me somewhere, because when I was going through this, I made a map of all of the for 3028, all of the current weapons and battle mech manufacturing plants in the inner sphere. And the elements, the components that each of them made. It was kind of like a objective raids for 3028, which was one of my favorite. I mean, there's not a lot of writing in it, but I mean, as a source book, I don't know why, I loved objective raids.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of that level of detail. All the manufacturing, where's all this stuff made? All the manufacturing centers, all the components, and the full listings of it. So I did make something similar for that same time frame. But let me tell you, that's some really hard information to unearth, because the history was so sketch and thin back then and changed so fast that I mean, the original presentation of Defiance Industries, on Hesperus 2 was that it was just a warehouse, that the factory that had been there had long since been destroyed and mostly looted.
Wow. Well, there are people who would be salivating to kind of have access to the kind of that document and kind of know where all those things are, and just for reading to kind of see logistically where all these things are coming from, I mean, that would be awesome. For me, whenever I read it, and you just see the name in front of the PPC of where it came from, and it's like it kind of your brain flown. That it's like, and that's part of what BattleTech is that it's peeling the layers back, and there's just so many different layers there, and it's awesome to
Well,
think.
Charrette ripped me a new one about that, because I do have my own sort of my own fan fiction books. If I could get my camera on there, right? Like that. Here's one of them. And I obsessively put the name of the manufacturer in front of every weapon system as I was writing these books.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when he read it, he was like,
yeah, that'll break the flow.
He's like, he's like, this is one of the worst cases of game-itis I have ever seen, Michael.
Oh boy. Well, I mean, the fact that Robert Charrette's reading your fan fiction is a good story on its own.
Well, he did it as a favor to me, and he absolutely disabused me of the notion that it was ready for publication. I used to think John Helfers just hated me. Mm-hmm. But then after Charrette actually gave it a critique of my book, I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. It's fan fiction. It's pulp fan fiction.
Well, your skill on the source book and the TRO side is quite high. So it's just we gotta accept our niches, right? Where our skill set is. Just like we both love to be graphic designers, but neither of us are. So let's so kind of little known maybe tidbits of kind of BattleTech history. Let's kind of pick your brain. What are some things that you've kind of found out through all kind of your research, on either the kind of production side or kind of the legal side, that are kind of just like cool little tidbits that people would appreciate kind of being aware of or would think would be pretty cool.
Right. So I mean, the original presentation of the Battle Droids universe, mm-hmm. The idea was that there were no mechs were being built, and and technology was disintegrating, and getting progressively worse. It's the sort of the Scavenger-esque, Mad Max, post-apocalyptic, really gritty feeling. And the thing that I actually learned, because that's at its core, for some reason, was what appealed to me about the franchise most, was the idea that you had a society that was degrading, mm-hmm. basically descending into chaos. But that idea ended within a year.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of I hear a lot of 3025 grognards, or 3025 is the only kind of BattleTech that ever existed. But I think what I really learned is that the BattleTech that I was originally drawn to, it was gone as soon as, it was gone right after BattleTech, Battle Droids became BattleTech. It started disappearing right then. Mm-hmm. And it didn't take long to just, become, suddenly mechs were produced again. Suddenly there were factories. Suddenly jump ships were built. Everything started flooding back. And then, within 5 years, even now the clans are coming. We've got all these new designs. There's factories everywhere. So, as much as I get really nostalgic about like this version of the BattleTech universe that was gritty, and there was family mechs, and everyone hoarding on to their family locust for centuries, like a mech would run for centuries. That whole romantic idea, very short-lived. And I'll tell you, here is what I learned about why that happened. It's bad business. Yeah. It's a bad business model. Yeah. If you're looking at this game as a business model, which it is, you've got to keep bringing in the new. Yeah. You have to keep making new products, which means new mechs, which means more mechs, which inevitably means more powerful mechs and new technology. So the actual original concept of the what I'll call the Battle Droids world, would never fly as a business model.
Hmm.
And that's ultimately why it changed, and we got all of this new technology, new mechs, more mechs, and everything had to be produced again.
Yeah. And hearing you say that, it made me think of the series on Netflix, The Toys That Made Us. Have you seen that?
I haven't.
It basically, they go into each of the toy franchise, He-Man, Star Wars, Barbie, and they talk about it. But what was fascinating through those kind of historical accounts was where back in the 80s, where when they were launching kind of a toy, it was so multidimensional in terms of there was the cartoon and there was the comic book, and those things fed into the demand. That was essentially their marketing for the toys. And then kind of looking to BattleTech, and you can see that kind of industrial kind of way of doing things in BattleTech. I mean, you see, like you're saying, once they realize, okay, that this is too gritty a universe for us to sustain if we want to make money for more than a year, so we have to kind of move it forward. And then you say, well, here, William Keith, let's write about the Helm Memory Core, and the Helm Memory Core is kind of their way to say, okay, well, this is then opening up in the novels and the story our way to kind of advance and be making new product. And then you have the clans coming in also. Clans are coming in through the novels as well as the product, and so that there was this awesome kind of collaboration. And we're starting to see that, see that more, in the Kickstarter coming forward. But you also don't. It's in the modern kind of entertainment industry and stuff, it's more like movie toys. It's movie toys, and there's not as much kind of a multi-dimensional kind of role and kind of plan in that, as it is, or it's not as narratively driven. And kind of, I think in our current marketplace, it's so, this movie sells toys, and it's like the toys are where the money is going to come from, and they get sort of lazy a lot of times with kind of the movie to get to the toy. And for BattleTech and a lot of those original ones, certainly like a He-Man or GI Joe, which were, I mean, He-Man was purely created to sell toys. Like it was the toy was made and they're like, let's make a cartoon so we can sell the market and sell these toys. And BattleTech, and I'm a big believer in the fact that BattleTech survives because of the lore. Is that without the richness of the universe, the game wouldn't have sustained. Even the online, well, the online game is awesome, and I think it could have kind of continued on, because who doesn't like big robots shooting each other? But you can get that in other ways. It wouldn't kind of be that BattleTech in history. And even Mech Warrior 2, when Mech Warrior 2 came onto the scene, it was like the amazing opening cinematics, that's lore, right? And that's what's kind of hooking. And then the soundtrack, I mean, it's amazing for Mech Warrior 2 as well. But that's cool, and to look at that. And I think I remember reading that when in your Unseen document where you're talking about just how gritty Battle Droids was. And for me, I'm always thinking, it was like, I feel like, if that was truly the case, like nobody's going to engage in a mech battle. It was like, it's like someone saying that, taking their magic cards and they have all these Power 9, Moxes and stuff, and being like, well, we got to play a game, but we have to play it with no sleeves, and we got to shuffle our cards by hand and bend them in order to play. I feel like it's like, who would do that? And if battle mechs were that rare, it's like, who's engaging in battle?
Well, which is why a company of mechs is sufficient to safeguard an entire planet.
Yes, which I joked about with Blaine in our podcast. Is that's kind of like my pet peeve in BattleTech is the scale of kind of the conflicts and just kind of moving around and how much it takes to defend one thing or another. But I do like the fact of how through the succession wars, how things degraded to the point where people aren't really aggressive anymore. It's more border, it's more guarding your borders. And some of the fans had created this awesome graphic where it mapped out where all the units were in the inner sphere and where they were stationed at any given time. And it's just all like the inside of the territories are almost barren, of any defense. It's just the borders. And it's kind of like, so I like how that has kind of followed the theme of the fact that, well, there's just not enough mechs to do both anymore. And the Piranha principle, and how the Piranha principle kind of maintains itself in BattleTech, of like the reason that piranhas don't eat each other. It's just because then it starts this feeding frenzy, and why the houses are kind of in this locked in this stalemate of, I can't, Kurita can't, go all out on Steiner, because then Davian would come in from the other side.
Well, I mean, in the current timeline, Travis, the dragon holds New Avalon right now.
I haven't gotten that. I'm on Blood of Heroes in my read through, so I am way behind.
Right.
I am way behind the current state of BattleTech. I'll get there. Like I said, by the time I'm 50, I'll be caught up, and then by that time, BattleTech will be in the 33rd century.
If you look at a couple good source books that Catalyst did make that I really appreciated was the first and second Secession Wars.
Yes.
Books. Those are wonderful. I never realized, for example, in the first Secession War, how deep the DCMS drove into the Federated Sons. They were on the doorstep of New Avalon, shortly after the fall of the Star League. I had no idea.
Yeah, those are amazing source books, and now that and now they're on print on demand too. And I've been searching on eBay for forever to get the first Succession War book, and I finally found it. I spent more on eBay than I had on any other sword book. I think it was like $95 or something to get it. Oh. And literally the week later, I found out it was on print on demand for $20. I was like, no. But for people that haven't read that, I mean, they read like novels. They're amazing. They read as well as Shrapnel and probably way better. It's but the source book and the writing that Catalyst has put out is amazing. They've done a great job there. So, I would anytime we can connect to kind of get that trading card game, maybe once the world opens again and people can go places, certainly if I'm on a road trip down through your rural area, I'll connect for sure. But it's been a ton of fun, and I'm kind of more than happy to kind of make the community kind of aware of kind of these awesome, fan productions that you put out, because I think anybody can kind of enjoy them as much as the official product, and sometimes more.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. I mean, some of the other stuff that I've seen out there, the fans of BattleTech are a ravenous, crazy bunch. I mean, there's some amazing stuff going on out there. In fact, I've seen. There's the inklings of that fan-created movie. There's been inklings in the past that got shut down, and then maybe it'll happen again. Like I said, it all goes back to Mr. Bullock. Sometimes, you just gotta take the chance.
Gotta do it.
You just gotta pull the trigger and be like, okay, I'm gonna do this thing.
Yeah, I was telling Blaine about the Freehet, production that was out there. That was the half-finished movie, which is gorgeous, and just the mood of it, and using the Mass Effect music just sets the mood. So is that the movie you were talking about, or is there another movie I'm not even aware of out there? That's the one that I know. That's the one I know. That's awesome.
And of course, cool. I think we should also also have to say, you must have heard about the big, STL takedown, the big 3D takedown.
Yeah.
Thingiverse files, right?
And I understand it. I understand that, how copyright law works, and how you can't enforce a copyright without, you can't ignore that stuff and then come back later and selectively enforce it. So I understand it from the business side, but it's definitely sad. But that being said, I just bought a bunch of 3D printed mechs, 2 weeks ago on Etsy. So, they're still out there. Right. And I see it from that legal side of they have to enforce their copyright, and it came from Topps and not CGL anyway. And so, Topps doesn't care, about the details of that. But also, I thought it was funny listening to people talk about it. It's like, I mean, I don't know anybody that's, that has pockets that's not buying the new product.
Yeah, that's true.
And for me personally, I mean, I went way into the Kickstarter more than my budget allowed at the time. Like I think many BattleTech people did. But when I'm going on the tabletop, I don't want, four stingers or something that all are in identical poses. I want them all different, and so, getting those 3 prints allows me to kind of mix it up, and, cutting their arms off and magnetizing is kind of another way that I do it.
Oh, yes. Well, you're getting into the black hole now.
Yeah, no, it is a black hole. It really is. But yeah, what were your thoughts on the takedown when it came through?
Well, in the long view, it's always been ironic to see something like that happen, because it's pretty clear that the original FASA just ripped off the Macross art.
Yeah.
Under pretenses, under some pretty thin pretenses, and CGL's got its own, has had it's of its own shady business history. So, I've got mixed feelings about it. I just love to, and as a fan producer, I mean, I think you just embrace your fan base and let them do what you want. I mean, really, what fans are doing? We're just filling in the voids, man.
Yeah.
We're just filling in the places that, for whatever reason, CGL hasn't done. I wouldn't have made TRO 3028 if they had put out Secession Wars, with new art.
Yeah.
I'd have been fine with that. I'd have never been moved to make it. I'm sure I would never have been moved to make it. And I think that's what we're seeing with the 3D models. People are just rushing in to fill in the gaps, to play with the miniatures that they want to play, or to get miniatures that they can't otherwise get.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge supporter of that. Now, whether it's legal or not, I don't like to go there.
That's what the courts are there to decide, right?
For my own perspective, I came down on this whole issue simply by just putting it up for free. That's how it made sense to me. I was like, well, I'll make this stuff up, but I'm just going to give it away, because I've had plenty of people who would have bought it. I mean, I could have sold it. It's not like I didn't have thoughts about, I could print these out, these nice professional full-size color copies, put them up on eBay or put them up in some Facebook group and sell them like hotcakes. Because I could have, and I thought about it. I had some people suggest that I ought to, but when it comes down to being a fan of your franchise, I just want to put some smile on people's faces and share the love. That's where I fall on it. And if you want to share your 3D sculpted love, I'm like, you ought to be able to do that too.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just like nobody's not buying the new source books and TROs because TRO 3028 is out there, and nobody's not backing the Kickstarter because they can print their own, King Crab or something out there. But no, it's I think that you've mission accomplished in putting smiles on people's faces, there. So it's it's a good job. And what have you are there any kind of legal things that you've dealt with? Has anybody reached out and said, kind of Michael, kind of maybe pump the brakes on this, or just kind of?
Oh yeah. Well, look, Blaine Lee Pardoe is like a cop. I mean, when I threw up on one of my fan fiction novels, I put up the Great Battle Master from the original Mercenaries Handbook. It's the most iconic Battle Master I can ever think of. I used it in the TCG card. I just love it. In fact, that series of art, Knutsen's art in there, I love. So I put it on the cover of my book, and then I had shared the link on a private Facebook group, no less. And he was on that in like 2 seconds. Do you have permission to use that?
Yeah.
Take it down.
Well,
But I'll tell you what.
Are the same restrictions there if you're not selling it, or have you found that as long as it's free, there's no issues, or is there still issues if people are just in general, if people want to produce fan content, what should they know about the do's and don'ts? Because you're kind of the master here. What can people do if they're producing, especially if people are producing their own trading card game sets? Because I'll be diving into that myself.
So luckily, and it goes back to the great fan base. There's a great BattleTech artist and his name's Florian. I want to say Florian Malise.
Okay.
He's got DeviantArt page, but and that's where I got the art from for the covers of these books. Most of it, I wrote him on his DeviantArt page. Because there's some fabulous BattleTech art being produced.
Yeah.
Look at Anthony Scroggins. He's official now. He didn't start official.
Yeah.
Hell, some of Scroggins' early sketches are on some of the TCG set, like the Annihilator. That's one of his early sketches, way before CGL. But anyway, so it was another BattleTech fan came to my rescue. He's like, "Oh yeah, you can use my artwork on the cover of your books. That's fine with me."
Awesome.
So I changed the cover out. And then I reposted it back up, and then I guess Blaine decided he didn't need to beat up on me about that, because I answered his question. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I took it down, I put it up with a different piece of art, and I have permission to use it. You know, I mean, so the bottom line is there are going to be people who are watching what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you may not know that they're watching, you know, but they're watching. And the other thing is, if you cross a line, it's inevitably one of them will let you know.
Yeah. Well, I think, and two, and, you know, there's certainly things that I would like to, you know, do in terms of, you know, a bumper sticker or a shirt or something just for fun, you know, and hopefully, you know, they know that we're all supporting the franchise, you know, and they kind of reach out and say, hey, you know, heads up to this, and not like, hopefully the first contact you get isn't, you know, a cease and desist letter or something like that. And it's just like, hey, you know, this kind of, you know, you gotta, you know, back off on this or gonna pull back on that. So, but that would be good. But it's been awesome talking, Michael. You know, I've had a ton of fun, and I can't wait to kind of, you know, see what comes out next with it. And I'll you know, I'll be happy to send as many people you know, towards the content that you have. So, you know, people listening to definitely kind of connect, and the links into the description, and you can kind of find it if you haven't found all of it or even some of it. You know, there's a lot of it out there to kind of connect with.
Well, thanks a lot, Travis. I appreciate you reaching out to me. I'm always, like I said, I'm always happy to talk.
Talk BattleTech. Yeah, I think we all are. Awesome, Michael.